Friday. It is great to be with you guys today. Today happens to be Valentine's Day. So happy Valentine's Day to all of you. So, in that light, I want to spend today's time together focusing on relational health and specifically in the direction or in this idea of God's design for us for deep connection. So, when we think about our relationships, I think it's important for us to start with the acknowledgement and the awareness that uh, there is like this deep kind of universal longing or experience that we all share. This deep desire that we have deep down inside to feel close, to feel connected, to feel like we are a part of something more than ourselves. What I mean by that is that we're in relationship with other people here in our home or in our neighborhood or in our community or in the workplace or at our church or wherever it might be, right? This universal experience that I mentioned, this longing of humanity to feel connected. And so we're going to just kind of walk through that today. And it's this idea again of God's design, it's like divine design that we were created for deep connection. So first of all, I just want you to join me and just think about like, let's start with this. Like, who in your life might you have a what you would uh, let's just qualify as a meaningful relationship? Some of you might have lots of people that come to mind. Some of you might have a few. Some of you might be struggling to come up with one. But if you can, just come up and identify one person that you are currently in relationship with or previously have been in a relationship with that you just felt like it was a meaningful, mutual, life giving relationship. Okay, you got that person identified? Good. Now, I just want you to take a moment and think about like a memory or a situation, an interaction that you had with that person that like brought you joy or it brought you peace or it had some kind of like quality to it that you felt seen or heard, you felt known. Like, can you come up with that again? That memory, that experience. I'm just curious for you. Like when I ask them, even when I'm asking these questions, I'm trying to do this same work for myself, and trying to just get in touch with some kind of emotional experience. Right? Like, what does it feel like to feel known or cared for or seen or heard or understood? What does it feel like to be with somebody and the outcome of that is it's life-giving, right? Or I feel less anxious or I feel more peaceful or I feel more at ease with myself. Yeah, that's this kind of idea of like a deeper connection. So this idea uh, that deep connection is God's idea, this idea that we were designed, actually designed for these deep connections. I think it's important for us to maybe to consider a few things as we do that. So, first is just around this idea that we are designed by God, right? So, if you're joining this and uh, today, and your uncertainty about faith or philosophy in that direction, I mean, just think about this idea of like what we might call intelligent design, right? So, if you have a founded faith and you're like, okay, I believe that I am created and designed by an intelligent being, or for those of us that hold faith, right, might say that we believe that God, the creator of the universe, not only created mankind, but he uniquely and specifically created me. So within that, this recognition of this awareness that, again, connection, deep connection is God's idea, it's God's design. And we can see this actually play out. If we think about maybe at the foundational part of it, again, God designed us and created us in his image. Well, what is God's image? God's image is he himself is in deep connection. He himself is in relationship and in community with himself. Right? If you understand the view of the Trinity, like the truth of God is three in one, right? The Father, the Spirit, the Son, right? There's this really beautiful truth that God is actually in deep connection with himself, right? Three parts in one. And so this kind of thought that he created us or designed us, right, in that same way that he designed us to be in deep relationship. And then I think it's important for us to recognize that humanity, God's idea and God's design is that he created us to be in relationship with him. Right? Like God, the God of the universe, and God could still, in all of his power and might, his infiniteness, right? He could still be God without the creation of humanity. Right? Like he could have still created the earth and the solar system and beyond that we don't even know exists out there. He still could have created day and night. He could have still created like the heavens and the stars and the seas, the land, still created animals and birds and fish and like all of creation, right? And he could have stopped there, but he didn't, right? With intention, God created and God designed us, like humanity, for the purpose to be in relationship with himself. And it's not only that, it goes on. So like God creates Adam, right? And he says, Adam, go name all the animals. And as that's happening, God recognizes and realizes that actually Adam, there's just one of him, just one of his kind. And the Bible says it is not good for man to be alone. So what happens? Like Adam falls asleep in the middle of the night, like God takes from his side, like from his rib, and from that rib he creates Eve. Like so we know it's like Adam and Eve, the very first two people who ever lived on this earth in the Garden of Eden. Right? God said it is not good for Adam to be alone, so he creates Eve. And I love this imagery that like Eve is not created from nothing, but from something. Eve is not created from some bone in Adam's foot, or bone from Adam's shoulder or neck or anywhere else. And I think there's actually significant symbolism in this idea that Eve was created. God pulled right from Adam's side. Right, this idea and this that we connect that Eve was alongside Adam, or Eve was a co-equal with Adam. I won't have time to unpack that today, but I think there's just such significance in that idea. So this part that we have to think about is, again, God designed us to be a reflection of himself, right? Which is in community with himself. And then this idea that God created us to be in community with him, right? He created humanity for specific purpose, to be in community and deep connection with him. And then this third part that I mentioned, which is God designed us to be in deep connection with one another, right? With Adam and Eve. And then from that, right, God's design from the very, very beginning, his design for marriage, his design for family. From that, we see the design for community, and all of it centers around this idea of deep connection. So before we go on, I just want to take a few moments and just talk about, so what hinders us, what holds us from, or what breaks connection? There's lots of things we can talk about, but I just want to identify a few of them today. So I think one of the important ones that is oftentimes left out of lists that I'm kind of walking through or kind of purposefully ignored. What breaks connection is hurt, like past wounds. When we experience hurt in our life, our tendency is to pull away. Like we tend to become defensive. We tend to withdraw, right? We struggle to be vulnerable and open and honest. And all of it is around this idea of a experience of lacking safety. It's hard for us to be connected with somebody if we don't feel safe. Right? If something has happened, this idea of past wounds or past hurts, if some things have happened in a relationship and the result of it is hurt, our tendency is to break connection, right? And we do that not because we're specifically trying to break connection as much as we are actually trying to do a different type of work. Let's think about it this way. So we're actually designed and created with two, at times, uh, forces that can sometimes work against each other. And it's simply this idea of uh, of of protection and connection. So protection is that part that God wired us with, the part of like our fight or flight response, the amygdala in the back of our brain that triggers for us when there's danger, the threat of danger, right? Like humanity wouldn't exist today if that was not part of our design. So there's absolutely this part of our design for protection, like our need for self-protection, self-preservation. And then as we're talking about today, there's this other side, which is this deep need and desire for connection. The reality is they have to coexist. So back to my point on what breaks connection, right? Like when we feel unsafe, right? When there's hurt, when there's injury, when there's wounds, we shift. Generally, we shift from this posture of connection to the other, this posture of protection. Okay, I think another thing that's significant in breaking connection is miscommunication. Like we could have a whole nother conversation just about communication. But I think just to note it for today is, when there's miscommunication and this idea of like when we make assumptions, when we misunderstand, when we misinterpret the intentions of others, like it's divisive to our relationships. It feels like it's disconnecting to our relationship. So then the third one is lack of intentionality. That's really important to note. So what breaks connection is simply the lack of intentionality. So how does that happen? Well, first of all, I think we have to understand this simple premise is that connection doesn't happen on accident. Like I've never been in a relationship, I'm not in any relationships where it just accidentally happened. Right? Like connected relationships happen with intention. So the more intention we put into a relationship, the more we can put effort forth in that relationship in ways that are meaningful and mindful and supportive and healthy, right? In a relationship, right? The more connected we can feel, the deeper we can feel in that connection with another person. But oftentimes, what happens is whether it's just the distractions of life, the busyness, the other factors I mentioned, past wounds, miscommunication, and other things that kind of play into it, our tendency often is that we just start to drift. Like that's actually a term we use here in the clinic, like this idea of like emotional drift or relational drift, which is I just kind of stopped trying. Right. It's not that I just woke up one day and decided I was going to be connected or disconnected from a person. It's just a gradual over time. Like I felt close or I felt connected to this person, but again, all of these other things that took priority, took time, took energy, took effort, they all just kind of slipped in and little by little. And before you know it, there was less intention, like intention to have meaningful conversations, intention to spend quality time together, intention to show appreciation and gratitude, intention to be present in moments that were meaningful in that relationship. Okay. Like I said, there's a lot more we could talk about, but I think just those three things, what tends to break connection, this idea of like past wounds and hurts, miscommunication, lack of intention. I want to talk about another key experience in connection. And it's this idea of our of how we behave in the midst of those interactions, particularly when there's it's emotionally charged. And so I just want to give a quick distinction between the idea of responsiveness and reactivity. So think about it in the context of conflict, disagreement, right? We're not on the same page. We don't see things the same way, right? You think it's this and I think it's that, or you think I'm right and you and I think I'm right. In those moments, in those experiences, we talked about this idea of where there's a break of connection. It's important for us to be able to kind of like take assessment of like, hey, what's going on in me, like the behavioral part of me. Am I responding or am I reacting? So here's the simple distinction between responding and reacting. Let me start with reacting first. Reacting is that whatever emotionally is happening inside of me, right? Whatever the circumstance or the situation was that's going on, whatever the thought is that I grabbed onto and I'm holding now, leads to some kind of emotional experience within me, right? So if we're in conflict, there might be a conflict, and the thought might be connected to something like they're trying to hurt me, or they don't understand me, or they're out to get me, or whatever it might be. Or here we go again. They've hurt me in the past, and it's going to happen again. Right? These thoughts that flood our minds, followed by emotional experiences of I'm anxious, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm disappointed. Whatever those emotions might be, those emotional experiences come out as behavioral expressions. So when I'm reactive, let's get back to that. When I'm reactive, it's simply this idea of a reactivity is the emotions are kind of in charge. The emotions are in control of how I'm behaving. That's what reactivity is. It's an emotional experience that gets expressed behaviorally, and I'm reacting, right? I'm reacting out of whatever emotional experience I'm having on the inside. It's different than responsiveness. Now, responsiveness might is it goes through the exact same sequence, right? Like there's a situation, and that situation is now a thought, right? The situation is going to lead to a thought. The thought I'm holding on to, but I'm actually doing some work, right, to be able to say, hey, is that thought that I've got? Do I like that thought? Do I want to replace that thought? I'm working to try to get to a place where there's a thought that is helpful for me. It's healthy for me, right? There's an emotion that gets connected to that, right? Same kind of idea. There's an emotional experiencing happening inside of us. But here's the difference with responsiveness. Responsiveness is when we are in charge of our behavior. Like we get to decide, how do I want to respond right now? Right? The situation's going on. I have these thoughts that I'm trying to do my best to believe that there is a good intent from the other person. I'm trying to have that believe the best mentality. Right? There's some feelings that are showing up in me, but my ability to respond, which is I'm going to take a deep breath, right? I'm going to choose to believe the best. I'm going to be able to kind of get in touch with those emotions. And ultimately, I'm going to be able to actively make a choice, make a decision. Okay, how do I want to respond in this situation? Very, very, very different than the former that I talked about. This idea where there's that thought which fills me with emotions, right? Which quickly comes out as a reaction, right? Where the emotion is in charge of me rather than I'm in charge of the emotion. And ultimately, I'm in charge of the behaviors. Okay. So before we wrap up, I just want us to take a few moments of reflection. Like, I think it's good that I'm able to offer you some insights and give you some frameworks, and all of that is wonderful. But I think it only works if we are able to kind of get in touch with ourselves, do some interpersonal kind of work, and just have a moment of reflection. Okay, so here's question number one I want you to consider. Question number one is this: which relationships in your life feel strong and deeply connected? Which relationships in your life feel strong and deeply connected? Okay, so remember, as we started this, right, you identified a single person in your life. Again, there might be many people, but you identified a person in your life, right, where you have been or you currently are feeling close and connected to. Okay, so go back to that, right? Expand them a little bit more. Right? Are there other people in your life you feel like you have a strong and deeply connected relationship with? Okay, then here's the kind of the curious part of that is ask yourself the question, why? Like, what is it about those interactions? What is it about the dynamics in that relationship that you feel like you have a strong and connected relationship? Okay. And then we have the second question, which is simply this: which relationships do you have in your life where it feels distant or maybe it feels strained? Like, if you're just honest with yourself, honest with myself, right? Like, not every relationship is close and connected. Not every relationship feels wonderful all the time, and that's actually not a criticism as much as it's just a recognition. Any relationships has ebbs and flows. It has ups and downs. It has goods and bads. It has highs and lows. So think about this, like in the present, like a snapshot, like which relationships feel distant or strained. Okay. And then I want you to follow with that same kind of curious question: why? Like, what do you think is causing the disconnection? Like, is it some of the things I mentioned earlier, like past hurts and wounds, miscommunication, lack of intention? Is it related to how we're kind of responding when we get into moments of disagreement and conflict? Like, we're reacting rather than responding. Okay. So again, those two questions, right? The first question is which relationships do you feel close and connected to, and why? The second question: which relationships feel distant and strained, and why? I think it's really important, for the sake of insight and reflection, that we take those moments to be honest with ourselves. All right. So before we wrap up, I just want to talk about, so what can we actively do to cultivate deep connections in our relationships? And I think it requires us to be able to, as we kind of took assessment, right? Which relationships are thriving and we feel close and connected, which ones are not. And in the midst of both of those, the awareness that there's always room for improvement, right? Even in the connected ones, we can be more connected. In the distant ones, we can take active steps with intention to become more connected. Okay, so there's lots of things that impact and influence the idea of cultivating deep connection, but I just want to share a few of them with you. The first is be present. Like, be present with people in your lives. Be present in those relationships. What I mean is not just like physically present, but like you're mentally present, emotionally present, like you're showing up, like your whole self, like mind, body, and spirit. Like you're dedicating intentional time. You're doing active listening. You're eliminating distractions. Like when you're interacting with this other person, you're not also scrolling your phone. You're not also listening to the radio and have the TV on, and you're not in the middle of like having your laptop open and you're typing and you're trying to listen and talk at the same time. But you're shutting down all those devices. You're eliminating all those distractions, right? To be present. The second one is communicate with clarity. Communicate with clarity requires us to be able to do what we call assertive communication. It requires us to actually dig kind of deep, requires us to be able to take some risks, the risk of being vulnerable and open and honest. In fact, assertive communication has these three kind of qualities to it. It's one's ability to be able to express what they think, how they feel, and what they need. So think about that in your relationships, particularly those relationships where you want to find a deeper connection. Your ability to communicate with clarity, with honesty and transparency. Like if you're able to get to the place where you'd say, "Can I tell you how I really feel? Like what I really think, or what I really want?" And then the last one we're just going to talk about today is practice the small acts of connection. Like clinically, there's a term for that. We call that micro interactions. It's just the small, simple things, right? It's like the encouraging words, it's the shared activities, it's the quality time, right? It's the little things we can do consistently. Let's go back to that idea of intentionally, right? Whenever we can lean in with intention, like we can actually design opportunities for deeper connection. And that's what this is, right? Practice the small things. Be intentional in your actions with those important people and in those significant relationships in your life. Okay, last thing I want to offer to you is this kind of relational action plan. Okay, so again, it's good to be able to get these insights. It's good to be able to take a moment of personal reflection. I think it's also important that we take a few moments to consider how we might put this into action. Okay, so consider these three questions. Question number one, who do I want to build a stronger connection with? So you're going to go back to that list from earlier, people I feel connected with, the other list of people I feel disconnected with. Okay, just want you to identify one person from either list, and be able to say, well, who do I want to build a stronger connection with? Okay, jot that down. The second question is this: what small action can I take this week to invest in this relationship? I love that question. What small action can I take this week to invest in that relationship? Like, is it a conversation? Is it like writing them a note, sending them a text? Is it inviting them out for coffee? Is it maybe it's the need to sit down and offer an apology, or have a conversation that might lead to greater clarity, whatever that might be. What we're talking about in this question is what small step, I'm going to insert the word of intention, like purposefully, I can engage this other person, right? Where I can invest in that relationship. And then the third part of this third question is, how can I invite God into this relationship? That's an important one, right? Like if God is the center and God is the foundation, like scripture talks about this idea of like a cord of three strands is not easily broken, like us, someone else, and God being that third strand, right? Like I think it's important for us, if we're going to work towards healthy and God honoring relationships, I think it's important that we invite God into the process. Right, so is that prayer, scripture reading, whether for that other person, right? You might be able to pray together, study God's word together. You might be able to serve together. Okay, so the actionable part of this is not just writing them down, but the actual part is like making a commitment this week to step into it. Okay, so just quick recap and kind of takeaways. So this idea of deep connection is part of God's design for us. Secondly, disconnection happens when we're not intentional. And this third part, we can take small, tangible, practical, and intentional steps to strengthen our relationships. All right, it was great to be with you guys today. As I mentioned at the very beginning, today's Valentine's Day, so happy Valentine's Day again to each of you. If you want to share with us, reach out to us, make a comment for us of what you're committing to this week, and looking forward to whatever work that is, right? That you are intentional about identifying that individual, about taking some active steps and inviting God into the process. All right. Hope you all have a great weekend.